What's the Church of Scientology so afraid of?
This is SPTV.
Hello and welcome to the Scientology Money Project with your host, Jeffrey Augustine. I'm here today with a special report on the sentencing of Danny Masterson. I was there in the courtroom when Judge Charlene Olmedo sentenced him to 30 years to life. And a lot of great videos have been made. Aaron Smith-Levin, Mike Rinder, and Leah Remini, Tommy Scoville, and others. I wanted to add my insights from my notes. I also attended both criminal trials of Danny Masterson. First ended in a hung jury. The second, he was convicted. And I was there when the jury found him guilty of two of the crimes. There's things that happen between conviction and sentencing, including a probation report. And so Danny Masterson has spent 100 days in LA Men's Central Jail until sentencing happened this past week. People asked me how he looked. That was the first question I got asked. He didn't look any worse for the wear. He had grown his beard back. During trial, he didn't wear a beard, his trademark beard. Apparently, a jury consultant said you'd look less like a rapist if you shaved your beard off. But the powerful evidence and testimony that Jane Doe has presented at the second criminal trial clearly convinced the jury beyond any shadow of a doubt that he was guilty of the crimes of which he'd been accused. At sentencing, Masterson came out and he was not in an orange prison jumpsuit. I don't know the law in California about if a convicted criminal is allowed to wear civilian clothing. I don't know the law. If you're a criminal defense attorney, please weigh in on the comments. I'd like to know. I do know that the Church of Scientology is very mindful of public relations, of PR. Everything is PR, and most is phony PR. And the last thing Scientology would want is for the sketch artist in the court. Her name's Mona. She's very famous, exquisite work. They would not want the sketch artist sketching him in an orange prison jumpsuit and that being distributed to the newspapers of the world, Daily Mail, CNN, Fox. You go down the list of every media outlet, doesn't matter who they are, they do not want that image. But I'm not worried about it because the mugshot's going to come out soon enough. One thing I want to begin with is Judge Olmedo opened court, and the first thing that was done was there was a motion made for a new trial. And this was based on a case. They brought in a fellow who specialized apparently in motions for new trials. And he cited an obscure case called USA versus Briggs, Briggs. If you're a legal type and want to look it up. And it seemed non sequitur because this case had to do with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, in which back then, rape was a death penalty offense. And as this attorney was talking about the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and rape being a death penalty offense, therefore there's no statute of limitations, Masterson looked really uncomfortable. What's going on here when the word death penalty was mentioned? Masterson looked very like, what the hell is going on? Are we going there? Or I thought, this was 15 to life or 30 and not, why is death penalty being mentioned? He really looked shocked. He looked fucking shocked because he didn't know what the hell was going on. This technicality didn't sway Judge Olmedo. She knew the case. And also she cited the case of a California case called Perez. And I quote the law under which Masterson was convicted, the California Penal Code, on my blog, and I'll put that in the show notes. But basically, the California Penal Code says that any crime for which there is a life sentence, and that includes kidnapping, rape, and murder, any crime for which that carries a life sentence, there's no statute of limitations, and the person could be arrested any time during their natural life. That's the Perez case. And that held precedent, so the judge dismissed the motion for a new trial. And of course, as has been noted, the victim impact statements, which is break your heart, it brought me to tears. Very hard to listen to what the hell these women have gone through. And it wasn't just what Danny Masterson did to them. That was primarily it, to be sure, but it's what the Church of Scientology did to them, because the Church of Scientology has been all over this case. In fact, as it was reported, Church of Scientology is represented by the criminal defense attorney, Vicky Poboreski. She somehow wound up with documents belonging to the LA District Attorney's Office. And Thomas Mestro did not fight the sanctions on that, the $950 sanctions. He apparently turned them over to Vicky. And I don't know if there's a grand jury going on that. I suspect there's more to come, and that Poboreski and a few other people are perhaps the subjects of a grand jury investigation. But I don't know for sure. But that's what I've heard. And I'm just passing along. I'm a private investigator in the state of California, so I hear things. I hear things. And if you want me to hear something, contact me. You can go to my blog, it's Scientologymoneyproject.com. Let me know. I'll check it out. You might be wrong. You might be right. I'm always interested in hearing about things as a LAPI. Scientology's been all over this, and they're so dirty, and that's part of what I wanted to talk about. So the motion for a new trial having been dismissed, there was victim impact statements. And then when those were done, they really made an impact. And I'm so glad that the court allows victims to say the hell they've been through. This is a very important part of the legal process. And what really, I watched Danny Masterson while the Jane Does were reading the impact statements, and he showed absolutely no remorse, as has been noted, no remorse whatsoever. And there was an undertone of contempt. He had contempt for these women that he had assaulted. He had contempt for them. Danny Masterson still believes he was a victim here. You know, I'll tell you a story. I was a juror in the 1990s in a murder case, and it was gruesome. This guy in his 20s, he was high on drugs, and he stabbed his girlfriend to death. And it was one of those stabbings, like 127 stab wounds. And the evidence presented was graphic, the crime scene photos, the body. I'm going to give a trigger alert. You have to stop listening to me. If you get triggered, just turn the video off, because this is not for children, and some people who've experienced violence shouldn't listen to me. So just turn the video off, okay? In this case, the tip of the knife broke off in the woman's skull. And the coroner saw cut that piece of skull out of the deceased woman, and had it in a box and showed it to us as an exhibit, because the knife was found. Of course, his bloody handprints were all over it. And the knife that he threw away linked to the tip that was embedded in her skull. And of course, the physical evidence linking him was irrefutable, and we found him guilty. And he was sentenced accordingly. So I've been there in the jury where you're having to hear hard things, and I respected the jury for deliberating, and that's how the system should work. And I didn't know this guy from Adam, so I was just a jury, as part of one of his peers in the community. So I have been on a jury in a murder case. Once I was dismissed, I didn't go back to hear the sentencing, the impact statement. I mean, I didn't go back for any of it. Okay, I was done. I'd served my duty, and that was really something to go through a murder case as a juror. So I say that to say this, that this guy that killed his girlfriend, he was one of those just cold-blooded killers. When you looked at him, he didn't testify. He didn't take the stand. Like Masterson, he didn't take the stand. But when you looked at him, and he looked at the jury several times, I think he was trying to intimidate us maybe. But there was no life behind his eyes. He was just cold-blooded, no life behind the eyes. It'll give you that look. I looked right back at him. I'm not going to react to that bullshit, that intimidation. I'm going to do it. None of us on the jury were going to do it. So we wanted to hear the facts of the case. That's a cold-blooded killer. Danny Masterson is a different kind of criminal. He's an entitled narcissist. And as the circumstantial evidence showed at trial, and Deputy District Attorney Ariel Anson summarized it in her closing arguments, she said it all begins with a drink. And what the circumstantial evidence showed is that Danny would hand women a drink into which he had slipped a date rape drug. He roofied the women because they all consistently testified they were handed a drink and then they started getting lightheaded, dissociative states, and then they would wake up having been violated. And I'm not going to go into those details again because they could be very triggering. And that's why the jury found him guilty. The women told the same story, same pattern, what we call modus operandi, the same MO Masterson used. Spike a drink, give it to a woman, and then use her. So it was pretty vile. This is one of the Jane Does at a event, I believe it was Denim Day. My church told me it's not rape if he's your boyfriend. My church was Scientology. My boyfriend was Danny Masterson. That's what the women had to go through. That's only part of it. This Jane Doe was told it's not rape if he's your boyfriend. So is Scientology saying to a woman, to all women who are members, it's not rape if he's your boyfriend or your husband? One of the Jane Does testified that when she was in a relationship with Danny Masterson, the church told her that to keep her exchange in, she had to give sex to Danny Masterson anytime he demanded it. Anytime he demanded it. Like, women are just sexual objects, and they got to give it up for Danny when he says, "Hey, I want sex, do it." That's their doctrine of exchange. That's sick and twisted. In Scientology, this idea of exchange is that you got to keep your exchange, and if I do something for you, you got to do something for me. But the idea that a woman's a sexual object and you got to give him sex to keep in your exchange because he's working on TV and you're not working, that's part of how sick and twisted Scientology is. And that's in the court record. That's direct testimony in a criminal trial here in LA. So I'm not making that up. And I'm glad that Jane Doe went out there and shared this. In 2003, 2004, when Danny Masterson was committing these sexual assaults, to give some context of what was going on at the time is important for new Scientology watchers. At that time, Tom Cruise had divorced Nicole Kidman some years earlier, and he was looking for a girlfriend. He's looking for a wife. So what the Church of Scientology engaged in was called wife auditioning. And these stories came out that they were wife auditioning. They wanted to find, the Church of Scientology wanted to find Tom a perfectly obedient Scientologist Stepford wife. I guess someone who would give him sex on demand, who was as gung-ho of a Scientologist as he was, would be anti-psychiatry and would obey him and basically be his submissive, good Scientologist wife who would get with the program right away. The actress Nazanin Boniadi, she was auditioned, as were a number of other women, including Katie Holmes. So look at this is what I wanted to point out, Scientology's attitude toward women. If you're a male celebrity, David Miscavige will set up wife auditions for you, or at least he did for Tom Cruise. Scientology threatened to sue Vanity Fair and Maureen North over this Tom Cruise wife auditioning article. They said, go ahead. In fact, the editor of Vanity Fair, Graydon Carter, went and published all of Jeff Rivers' threat letters to sue on the internet. Graydon Carter didn't care. He stood behind the story. He stood behind Maureen North. Yeah, go ahead, sue me. And so all the letters would say, not for publication, which of course Mr. Carter took to mean, oh, absolutely for publication. So many Scientology letters we see over the years say not for publication, these threat letters from attorneys. So that means for publication. If I get a threat letter, Karen and I, my wife Karen and I, we've published several threat letters that we've gotten. from Gary Soder and the other Scientology attorneys. Send a letter. It goes online. Bigger thing here is wife auditioning. The idea that women are chattel, they're owned, they're possessions of Scientologists like Danny Masterson. Now, this was during the same period in, I believe it was 2005, Tom Cruise went on the Matt Lauer show. And this was when Tom Cruise was very radical. David Miscavige had radicalized him and was not only wife auditioning for him, looking for his perfect Scientology Stepford wife, but Tom kept his exchange in by going on the Matt Lauer show, where he publicly attacked the actress Brooke Shields for using psychiatric drugs to treat her postpartum depression. He said, "No, Brooke, you shouldn't do it." So that was what was going on in context. And Tom Cruise was, of course, the biggest actor in the world, still is. Not debating his talent, but he got radical. He jumped the couch on Oprah. But that was not a big deal. The big deal was when he was attacking psychiatric drugs and the right of women to make their own choices. And that was why Tom Cruise was rightly pilloried in the media. He was saying that Brooke Shields should have not taken psychiatric medication, that a woman didn't have a right to choose. Tom Cruise was acting like some Scientology Ayatollah saying women don't have a right to choose. They can't take psychiatric medications when there's alternatives, as if he were a doctor. And this is where Tom Cruise famously said, Matt, you're being glib. You don't know the history of psychiatry. I do. Excuse me, Dr. Cruise, you know the history of psychiatry? You know about neurotransmitters? And Tom Cruise said there's no such thing. There's no such thing, as imbalances in brain chemistry. He made that famous statement. So we're not dealing with a rocket scientist here. He might be a good stuntman and a pilot, but he's not a scientist. So again, in the context when Danny Masterson's committing his sexual assaults, he's in a world of the Celebrity Center where Tom Cruise is the dean of the Scientology celebrities, and he's calling the shots. So he's getting VIP service. They're out looking for a wife and actually conducting real auditions, as Maureen North documented, and you can look it up. He's also going on a rampage against psychiatry. And this is what Danny Masterson is seeing, that he too is entitled. Because one thing Scientology teaches you is that you're part of a master race called Homo novus, and that you're superior to Homo sapiens, and we're pejoratively called Homo saps, idiots, stupid, we're hypnotized zombies. So this is what's going on in Danny's mind. I'm entitled. When I want sex, I get it. And if I have to use a roofie, well, I'll just do it. So that's why I say he's in the entitled narcissist. And he is a Scientology-enabled sexual predator. And Tom Cruise is setting a certain amount of tenor by his radical behavior, his radicalized behavior on Matt Lauer, and even the way he expected the church to find him a Scientology Stepford wife. Now, this is the same period, 2007, where church leader David Miscavige makes his wife, Shelley Miscavige, disappear. And here we see Shelley with Leah Remini when Leah was still in the church. So it's been reported that David Miscavige has a mistress. Her name's Lou. I know her real name, I won't use it. But reportedly, he got mad at Shelley and he wanted to be with another woman. So he makes Shelley disappear, which in Scientology, as I've said, the most dangerous job is being the wife of the leader, because Mary Sue Hubbard, after she got out of prison for her crimes in Snow White, Hubbard bought her a house here in Los Feliz and then made her disappear. You can go through the thousands and thousands of pages of Scientology's websites, as I've said, and you'll never see any mention of Mary Sue Hubbard or Shelley Miscavige. They're non-persons. They're some of the disappeared class. A whole bunch of people you never hear about. So that, again, that's the context. Shelley's gone. Women are made to be disposable. Now, this was an issue at court in the red text. It's a high crime to report another Scientologist to the police. And L. Ron Hubbard writes, quote, delivering up the person of a Scientologist without justifiable defense or lawful protest to the demands of civil or criminal law. This is what the Jane Does talked about. They were told it was a high crime to go to the police and report that Danny Masterson had raped them. and that they could be declared suppressive persons and they'd be disconnected from their family and they would incur the wrath of the church, which is called fair game. So Scientology came out at trial. And as Mike Rinder noted, the civil trials are still coming and a lot more Scientology will be allowed in. But Scientology has tried to deny it. Corinne Powell, spokesman, said there's no policy preventing one Scientologist from reporting another to the police. Oh, really, Corinne? If I'm called to testify, I can give several examples of where Scientologists didn't report other Scientologists to the police. I'm working on a particular case where your church has withheld the truth, shall I say, didn't go to the police about something. And I know several examples where people should have gone to the police about things. The case, for example, of where Alexander Jensch, when he was alive and 14, he was sexually assaulted by a 40-year-old woman in the Sea Org in Clearwater, Florida. And the Sea Org knew about it and did not call the police. So a 40-year-old woman is having sex with a 14-year-old. When that happens in public schools, the 40-year-old teacher is arrested and charged with sex crimes. So you didn't go to the police for Alexander. And I know of certain case that I've been covering on my blog where there's about 6 Scientologists who should have called a certain person in New York. They should have called the police on him or the FBI, the SEC. They didn't, and they couldn't. So that's part of what the Danny Masterson case illustrates is how Scientology covers up its crimes, pedophilia, rape, financial crimes, to be sure, because David Miscavige, you're a Scientologist. You're the number one Scientologist. When all your regs engage in the Chase Wave credit card fraud, nobody called the police and turned them in for credit card fraud. Why? You knew they were committing credit card fraud. I'm not going to comment any more on that because there's more coming on that credit card fraud. But these are people, many who are elderly, that Scientology regs, their salespeople, put into $65,000 or more of credit card debt, ran 10 cards within a very short period so the credit reporting agencies wouldn't get on file. And they put seniors in heavy debt that they couldn't pay, and the church took the money. That's credit card fraud. That's elder abuse that the Church of Scientology knew about and didn't go to the police with and say, hey, these people are criminals. Instead, Miscavige, apparently, what did he do? He RPF'd, he fired the regs. He got rid of them. He declared them. Declaring someone, throwing them out of your church when they've committed a criminal act is not the same as calling the police and getting them criminally charged. So there's numerous examples, and I don't need to belabor the point. This is where the Jane Does really went through hell. February 2, 2020, Hollywood Reporter. Danny Masterson and his PR people in the Church of Scientology's Office of Special Affairs got together. The Jane Does who sued Danny Masterson were slandered and libeled as engaging in a shameful money grab. And it gets worse than this. Danny Masterson's civil attorney, Andrew Brettler, representing him in the civil cases, he said in 2020 when his client, Danny Masterson, was sued, quote, in what can only be characterized as paranoid delusions, Mr. Masterson's ex-girlfriends and one of their jealous husbands banded together to concoct these preposterous and bigoted allegations aimed largely against the Church of Scientology, unquote. Andrew Brettler, Los Angeles criminal defense attorney, he said that the Jane Does were caught up in paranoid delusions. Now that your client, Danny Masterson, has been criminally convicted of 2 counts of forcible rape and has been sentenced to 30 years to life in California State Prison, there were no paranoid delusions, Brettler. And you got to go to civil trial with a guy in an orange jumpsuit. So this was part of the psychological warfare of fair game that Brettler launched on behalf of his client. And to make it worse, he tried to spin it, along with the assistance of the church, I presume, as an attack on Scientology. Look at this non sequitur. The Church of Scientology covers up rapes and then tries to spin it as we're the victims. Our religion is being attacked. The Jane Does are attacking the Church of Scientology. And Andrew Brettler's only too happy to take a payday. That's what criminal defense attorneys do. Look, I don't blame him. He's doing his job. I'm just saying he's full of shit. There were no paranoid delusions. Tell that to the jury. The jury didn't find the Jane Does to be engaged in paranoid delusions. Neither did the court, neither did Judge Olmedo. So your client, your whole story is gone. Look at that. Again, that's to the disgrace of Andrew Brettler. Look, I don't underestimate him. I'm not insulting him. I'm just saying he's doing a job, but now he's been proven to be a liar. There were no paranoid delusions. That was his allegation. That's how he was trying to spin it. And he also goes on to say that, quote, giving these delusional plaintiffs the benefit of the doubt, they have seemingly convinced themselves that everyday inconveniences that are commonplace in all large cities, such as having their trash cans go missing or finding their car doors unlocked, are part of a large conspiracy against them by the Church of Scientology at the direction of one of their parishioners. What the Jane Does experience was fair game, and part of it is gaslighting. It's not commonplace for your car door to be unlocked because new modern cars, for a long time now, they lock themselves. So yeah, if you found your car door unlocked, that doesn't happen. That's not common. Neither is it for your trash cans to go missing. That's the work of Scientology PIs fucking around, gaslighting these Jane Does, and that's what happened. And if the records can be subpoenaed, or if the FBI did its job and raided Scientology, I'm sure we would find that. So the Jane Does were gaslighted, and Brettler is trying to say that they're having paranoid delusions. Well, that's the whole point of gaslighting, is to fuck around, do shit to victims, and then tell them they're paranoid. But that's what they get paid to do. That's what Office of Scientology Special Affairs do. So that's why Leah made a point. It's horrific to endure sexual assault, and not to take away anything from anyone who has. You add on to that the Church of Scientology's fair game and gaslighting. The purpose of gaslighting is to drive a victim to the point of insanity or suicide, to ruin their case, to make them look like screaming idiots because they're saying that these things are happening to them. So I just wanted you to see the calculated plan of attack to destroy the Jane Does psychologically, hopefully drive them to suicide. In one impact statement, one of the Jane Does said that if she would go to bed at night and she would say, God, if you're real, don't let me wake up. That's how bad it is. L. Ron Hubbard, in his affirmations written in 1947 when he was doing sex magic with Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard said, quote, who cares if they get pregnant? Pour it into them and let nature decide, unquote. L. Ron Hubbard, when he was divorced by his second wife, he claims to have never had, Sarah Northrup, she said that he beat her and that he was mentally insane, and that L. Ron Hubbard had told Sarah, if you love me, you'll kill yourself. Because Hubbard didn't want to go through the scandal of a divorce in the 50s when it was a big thing. So this is contextual. This is the background of the Danny Masterson case. It's Scientology at work. And one thing journalists ask me, what's the appeal of celebrities to Scientology? Well, you get your every whim catered to, but you also get a private mafia called the Office of Special Affairs. And there's plenty of stories about John Travolta and male masseuses and settlements. I know of a case in Santa Clarita really well that happened some time ago. And because I know the PI who was involved, and I when he drank, he talked too much. So the things that you get if you're a celebrity is you get a private mafia. Now, out in Hollywood, there's also private mafia, and they're called fixers. And one of them was Anthony Pellicano, who did some time in prison. And that's a different story. That's a different video. Office of Special Affairs, Scientology's private mafia, covered up for Danny Masterson for 20 years, including using Andrew Brettler as an attack dog to put out their line that these women had paranoid delusions and they were just attacking Scientology. At the same time, the public, and I don't think Scientology gets it. This is Western culture, as I've said, repudiating the tyranny of the Church of Scientology, because the rational thing to do is to fight tyranny. So locally here in Los Feliz, when word of Masterson's arrest came out, they were promoting Elizabeth Moss, Scientologist, her new season of The Handmaid's Tale. And you can see what the local community thought. They pushed back on the church. So the rational thing to do is to oppose the vicious tyranny of the Church of Scientology and call for the revocation of its 501c3 tax exemption. And my hope is that the Masterson conviction will galvanize people to call for the revocation of Scientology's tax exemption. It's easy to do, and I'll show you how. Let me go to this screen. If you go to my blog, I have evergreen pieces that are the most read up on top. And you can see to the right-hand corner top row, report Scientology to the IRS. And this I put out in 2015 when Alex Gibney had made Going Clear, the documentary, and he was being attacked. The IRS on its website says, quote, tell the IRS about suspected tax-exempt status abuses, unquote. And that includes violations of the law, covering up crimes, fair game. A 501c3 cannot break the law. That's called a violation of public policy. It can't break the law. So the IRS wants to hear about it. In fact, they say, quote, go ahead and complain. The IRS is all ears, particularly about complaints alleging any abuse of the tax-exempt status granted to a nonprofit organization. So if you go to my blog, top right corner, how to complain to the IRS, this is a Form 13909. You can download it from the website. You can be anonymous, just send in documentation. You need an EIN number of the organization. That's just every business, organization, church, etc., has an employer identification number, and I provide those for Church of Scientology International, Flag, etc. And it's basically easy to go through and submit it online. There it is, eoclass@irs.gov. You can even download the form and fill it out. So I make it very easy to complain. And I think that people can and should complain to the IRS about Scientology's conduct and behavior. And if you've been through fair game, you should fill out a complaint. You should also go to your local police department and ask to fill out an incident report. And as I covered with former Chief of Police John Poe, if you feel threatened by a Scientology PI, call 911. Stay safe. So anyway, it's easy to report the church to the IRS, and that's really the goal. The long-term goal is to get its 501c3 tax-exempt status, because it's not, in my opinion, a religion at all. It is organized for the purpose of systematic wealth extraction, vengeance, fair game, everything else except religious purposes, unless you define religion as the destruction of persons, human trafficking, exploitation, covering up sex crimes, etc. The headlines, found guilty of rape. The media went big on the story. And it's because, as I said, it's not, as Scientology is trying to characterize it, that there's a handful of people attacking it. That's not true. There's many of us who are in front taking some slings and arrows of fair game. That just goes with being an investigative journalist, with being a former member, with being a critic. You can and should speak out, but you have to decide for yourself what's appropriate in your case. If you're raising kids, stay anonymous. Anonymity is powerful. So many people do. That's smart to do. Read the blogs, watch the videos, but you can complain to the IRS. You can even write a letter saying you don't feel it's right. A lot of things you can do. But what Scientology doesn't get, it's not a handful of people doing this. It is Western culture itself watching this vicious cult at work. And every time it attacks somebody and says, we don't practice fair game, it just digs its grave deeper. Every time it covers up a crime, engages in all manner of very sadistic behavior. It uses child labor, and it unbelievably puts out the statement, we abide by all child labor codes. I mean, it engages, there's lawsuits over human trafficking. A young lady soon saying she was forced to marry. She was 16 and she was forced to marry a senior Scientology executive. Like, again, she was chattel. So Danny Masterson, having been sentenced, justice has been done. but there's no rejoicing in it. It's bad. It's bad that Jane Does were left damaged, scarred. Danny's going to prison where he deserves to go. If Scientologists were actually allowed to turn in another Scientologist to the police, Danny Masterson should have been reported to the police in 2003, 2004. None of this should have happened. And it just goes to point that the Church of Scientology lies and covers up crimes. So the bottom line is Danny Masterson was not a standalone incident. He was a symptom of a much larger obscenity called the Church of Scientology. So my only prediction I leave you with is there's going to be more fair game. Scientology and David Miscavige are going to go into foaming at the mouth fury over Danny's conviction, especially when the mugshot appears in social media, which it will. They're going to attack people who speak out against the church, and they're also going to engage in distractions. So how soon do we see yet another magazine cover in a tabloid saying, Tom Cruise is leaving Scientology? Because they always do that. The case took 20 years to get justice, but finally, as they say, the wheels of justice move slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. And that is what has happened in the case of Danny Masterson. So for the Scientology Money Project, this is your host, Jeffrey Augustine. Thank you for watching.